My name is Nate Boley, and 20 years ago, strength training changed the course of my life. I built a gym here in Bend, Oregon from scratch that's helped over 1,500 people change their lives as well through strength training. If you want to change your life, head over to benstrengthwarehouse.com, hit the Start My Journey button, and let's chat. All right, guys, we'll see you there. Hey guys, welcome back to the podcast, season 2. We have an awesome, super special guest here today, Dr. Amanda Westfall. Amanda, go ahead and introduce yourself. Who are you, what you about, and just give us a little 10 seconds.
Well, thanks so much for inviting me back today. It's so great to see all the changes in your gym, and I'm excited to hear about what you guys are doing as well. I am a podiatrist. I've been in Bend for 15 years, and I treat people that are ready to get out of foot pain and stay or get back to their activities. So today we're going to talk about things like why you need strong feet, how this is going to affect your strength training, some injuries, and go from there.
All right, awesome. That's super great. What inspired you in your strength training regimen or maybe backtrack, like how'd you get into podiatry?
So in undergrad, I went to Oregon State and I was studying exercise and sports science. I've been an athlete all through high school and college, and so wanted to work with active people. I shadowed different healthcare professionals, and the eye doctors and the foot doctors were the happiest. They were able to have like a good quality of life, get home at a decent time, have a family, but then also work with active people. So I ended up going to podiatry school out in Chicago. I was out there for 4 years and then did my residency surgical training in Indiana. But I'm from Oregon and wanted to come back home.
That's awesome. We're actually going to Chicago next week.
Awesome.
Yeah, for 5 days. And it's always so deceiving to go there in the early summer because it's beautiful there. And then you ask the locals and they're like, yeah, give it like 2 months and you're
it'll be hot and humid.
Yeah, or it's going to be, in the fall, wintertime, it's going to be negative degrees and windy as heck, right?
For sure.
I'm sure you dealt with some of that being there for 4 years.
Such a fun city.
Yeah, awesome. That's great. And then you said you were an athlete before. What kind of stuff did you do?
So in high school, I was a runner. I did cross country and track and played golf. And then in college, I was a rower. So just out in the cold water in Corvallis.
Yeah, absolutely. And all sports, they all start with your feet.
Yes.
Yes. And so you're like, that just segued perfectly into being a podiatrist and talking to, especially in Bend, there's so many active people. So I'm sure you're seeing different types of injuries and stuff like that you're able to treat, and you know what you're doing because you've done all that stuff.
Yes. And you may not have a foot problem now, but you're probably going to eventually have one.
I think you're probably right. Cool. Awesome. Well, what's the connection for foot health and like strength training? How does foot health impact overall strength and fitness?
Well, our feet are our foundation. So if you're having a foot problem, it's going to affect how you walk, how you lift. It's going to affect your knees, your hips, your low back. So you need that strong foundation and strong feet just as your baseline to keep your body healthy. If your feet are weak or stiff, then you're not going to be able to be as mobile and lift as much.
Sure, absolutely. Is there ever a time where you're like, hey, so-and-so, you need to do some strength training?
Yeah, definitely. And surprisingly, young athletes are actually often pretty weak.
Okay.
So if a young kid is having something like shin splints, we check, can you do a kind of a single leg squat? Can you balance on one leg? And often, particularly like elementary, middle school kids aren't able to do that. Yeah. If you can't balance on one leg, you can't run because you have so much more body weight on there when you're doing that. So you kind of need to start that strength training. I mean, those young kids don't need to be powerlifting, but just even doing body weight exercises to keep them from getting hurt.
Yeah, absolutely. So it's like one of those things, like if you can't balance on one foot, how do you think you could load it up with more weight? Like running or anything
you're
like
not going to be able to squat 200 pounds if you can't balance on one leg,
Well,
or you can, but you'll get hurt.
I was going to say, so I remember when I tore my meniscus on my left knee, I did it not working out, I did it at work, but my recovery, at that time I was squatting 550 pounds. I could not do a single leg squat at all. And the lady was like, I'm so surprised you have not been injured before, because it all starts with being able to do single leg stuff. And then you can progress to bi-leg, what do they call it, dual leg stuff.
Yes.
And I don't know how I got away with this for that long, but I did.
Well, and so so if somebody is kind of weak and they can't do even just balancing on one leg, then I definitely direct them towards strength training, because a lot of people, particularly runners, just want to run all the time and they don't want that strength training component. But if they want to run for years and years and years, they need to add that in so that they don't get injured.
Can you say that again? That was very important. Runners,
Dear runners of the world, you need to add strength training in and cut back a little bit on your mileage so that you can keep running well into your 70s.
Yes, absolutely. Great. Awesome. All right. Is there any specific footwear that you recommend for strength training athletes?
Well, so you'll see, if you look at any powerlifting meets, you'll see all the lifters are wearing different shoes for different lifts.
Yeah.
And there's a reason for that. So in a deadlift, you want your shoe to be pretty thin and flat.
Yes.
So a perfect example of that for a cheap deadlift shoe would be a pair of Converse. Why do we want that? You want your foot evenly distributed, you want a little bit of traction, and you want to be able to feel the ground so that your power through your heel and the ball of your foot is even because you're flat. And then for a squat, you'll see somebody will often wear a pair of lifting shoes that have like a higher heel. Why do we want that? Your lifted heel is going to help you increase your ankle mobility, and so you can go deeper into that squat and be a little more upright than if you were in a flat shoe. If you are just lifting for health and you're not competing, you don't have to buy a pair of weightlifting shoes, but a typical running shoe is going to be taller in the back and give you a little bit of that advantage and simulate a weightlifting shoe versus a really flat shoe.
Sure. One thing that I mean, and you may disagree with me, and that's okay. The running shoes, I typically try to go away from in the strong, like going into the competing stuff, because of the squishiness of the shoe, just like you were talking about in the Chuck Taylors, because you want that transfer of power from your foot to the ground. If you get those tall running shoes, I can't think of the name now, but they have like the 2-inch Hokas, that's what they are.
Yes.
Yeah, and they look pretty hokey, but I'm sure they feel great when you're running. The squishiness of that is really not advantageous.
Like a disadvantage.
It's a disadvantage for you to feel the ground and transfer the power. But if you're just lifting for fun, a pair of runners would probably be okay, just like you're saying. So you have a little bit more of that.
Just to have that advantage of having that ankle mobility, if you could.
And so for years and years and years, I was like against weightlifting shoes, but I was like, why can't I just get my ankle mobility better? And it just came to the fact that I just don't have any more ankle mobility. Like, I've done all the tricks, I've done all the stuff. The ankle mobility is just limited with me. I've got longer femurs and not the greatest ankle mobility. So lifters, I have to do it, and otherwise I just get my knees just take all the pounding.
Yeah. And for the average person, just like a weight lift, like a cross training shoe is great for the gym. Yeah. You don't have to switch to all these different kinds of shoes. Yeah. And you'll see people that are really big advocates of barefoot lifting. So take that with a grain of salt. Number one, most public gyms, you can't weight lift barefoot. Yeah. But if you want to do that in home and try it, that's fine. But the reason we want you in a shoe is to protect you. I've had people come in because they dropped a plate or a bar or a heavy barbell on their foot and they broke their foot. So number one, protection. Yeah. And then number two, traction, just for safety. Yeah. But if somebody is training at home and they really want to get into barefoot, you have to work your way up and walk on a variety of surfaces, get your feet stronger. In cultures where people are completely barefoot, their feet are wider and thicker because they have more muscle.
Sure. Yeah.
And so strong feet, that is a thing. But you have to work your way up to that. You can't be in a really structured Hoka type running shoe and then all of a sudden be running barefoot and weightlifting barefoot next week and not get hurt.
Yeah. The other thing is, so I broke my foot dropping a plate on it last August and it was not fun. I believe that if I didn't have my shoe on, it would have been cut and it was just bruised and the bone is broken. And it could have been way worse.
And that's the thing. You don't want to have to end up having, go to the ER because you need
your toe
stitched up. Or your toe falls off.
It's falling off, yeah. The other thing is there's lots of sharp things in the gym. And your feet are just not acclimated to, hitting metal things.
Well, and also, the average gym,
pretty dirty.
It's not the cleanest. You don't want to pick up athlete's foot or something like that. So.
Yeah. There's definitely that aspect,
especially in like a public shower or something like that. So
yeah, absolutely. Okay, cool. What are common ankle injuries in athletes? Foot and ankle injuries in athletes, and what are the most common foot and ankle injuries that you see in athletes who weight train? Is there a difference between somebody's like just running all the time and not strength training injuries for ankle and foot versus somebody who has weight trained? Or are they similar?
It depends. So I would say runners tend to get more of like chronic things like Achilles tendonitis or something that's pretty hard to get rid of.
Yeah.
You get a lot of these itises like Achilles tendonitis, plantar fasciitis,
Yeah.
patellar tendonitis. And
What about
weightlifters, often it's more of like an injury, like you were doing a motion and then your foot hurt versus like this low grade thing that's building up and getting worse and worse.
Gotcha.
But plantar fasciitis is really common in both. So that's inflammation of the ligament that starts at your heel bone, goes up through your arch to the ball of your foot, and you get this kind of stabby, achy pain at the bottom of your heel. That's actually pretty common. So if that happens to you, some things you can do is wear a more supportive shoe. Again, short term, you don't have to be in this all the time. Add an arch support, roll on a ball can be helpful for all those little trigger points, and then doing some strengthening.
Have you ever done any like fascia release or?
That's really helpful.
Dude, I did. I was having terrible plantar fasciitis last year, and I went and had my foot scraped, and it was the most uncomfortable, painful thing I've ever felt in my entire life. But it went away. Like the next day, I was like, it was gone.
Yeah, and that tissue gets bound up around there.
Oh, it was. So
and then we
bad.
compensate, so we're walking funky, and then our knee starts to hurt. So yeah, getting all those tissues worked out is really helpful with that manual therapy.
I had to go do it like 3 times, and I was sweating before I even walked into the office. I was like, I don't want to do this. It was so
It's like the most painful thing, but it is really helpful.
Yeah, it is super helpful. I will not lie. Like if I needed it again, I would go do it. I would grit my teeth and bear. But
and that's one of those things you want to catch early.
Yeah.
So if it's just a naggy pain that you don't deal with, it will get worse over time, and then it's hard to get rid of. So if you get these little aches and pains that are hanging around for a couple weeks, it's definitely worth going in.
Yeah, I think it's good to do like
early.
Yeah, like preemptive stuff, like maybe rolling on a little lacrosse ball or something like that, a couple times a week just to make sure it stays at bay, so you're not getting to that point.
Yeah.
Because once you've got there,
it's hard to get rid of.
It's hard to get rid of it, especially because you can't not walk on your feet. Like
I use them for everything.
You use them for everything. It's just like any injury. Like if you break your finger, you're going to be surprised how much you use that finger.
Yes.
Until
Even if it's not your dominant hand, you're going to use it way more than you think.
Yeah, awesome. Okay, great. And then so that segues right into what's some great injury prevention things that you could say.
So some things you can do at home. Number one, check your shoes. So look at the bottom of your shoe. If it's getting super worn out, the sole's coming off, it's probably time to replace your shoe. They say the average running shoe lasts like 500 miles. Most of us, if you're not a hardcore runner, aren't tracking that, although you can.
Yeah.
But if it starts to get really worn out on the bottom, if the side of your shoe is really compressed, then it doesn't have as much give and support anymore. So check your shoes. And then, like I said, walking barefoot. So it's good to walk a little bit in the grass, a little bit on dirt, a little bit on your hardwood floors, just to get the stimulus of a variety of surfaces. We should be able to walk barefoot without pain. Again, not all day, but you should be able to walk around your house a little bit and not have pain just standing in the shower. Another exercise you can do, we call this a towel curl. So getting an old hand towel and standing on it and using your foot muscles and kind of your arch to wrinkle up the towel.
Oh, yeah, I've seen
and
that.
then push it back out flat. It can make your foot kind of crampy and sore, and that's because you don't use those muscles a lot.
Sure.
So work your way up on that. Try it like 5 times and then do it in a couple days, see if you can get up to 10. And then another one you can do, roll on the lacrosse ball like you talked about. And then find a hallway in your house and walking down the hallway barefoot on your heels, and then walk back to the beginning on the balls of your foot, walk down on the outsides of your feet, walk back on your inside, kind of on your arches. Just working on that mobility and strengthening and getting everything moving.
Do you think a lot of
helpful.
injuries in your foot come from just like imbalances in muscles and?
Often, something's really tight, and then something else could be like loose or weak, and then we compensate. So
and then just pushing the bone in a way it's not supposed to be, or the tendon's just overused, and it's just like, hey, no.
Right, or you have an old meniscus tear or arthritis in your knee, so you're getting more compression on that side, and then you're compensating with your foot.
Yeah.
it
So you
definitely is
think that
related.
like maybe inspecting the bottom of your shoes every now and again and seeing where you're maybe putting
seeing
more?
where the wear pattern is,
That's
and there's some people that are really flat-footed that have never worn any kind of arch support, and not all of us need those, but adding an arch support could give you a little bit of pain relief. So
Is that something that you would do in your practices? Somebody comes to you with foot pain, you're like, hey, let me see your shoes.
Yeah, we look at their shoes.
Really? Okay, cool.
We talk about what their activity is. Like, so I have a patient right now that's trying to walk the El Camino Trail in Spain.
Oh, that's
so
awesome.
he's like, okay, here's my couple pairs of shoes. We're working on, okay, do you need insoles? What socks are you going to wear? Because you're going to walk, hours and hours every single day and have to pack everything with you. So you can't just have another pair of shoes to switch to, or buy a new pair of shoes in Spain, if you have bigger feet. So we look at shoes. We kind of see, okay, what's your everyday shoe? If you're a business person and you have to be at trade shows and you have to be in dress shoes, okay, your foot still hurts, but maybe we need to add an insole to your dress shoe, or can we change it a little bit just to accommodate your foot?
I can't think of the guy's name now, but he has a business called Squat University. Do you know what I'm talking about?
Yes.
What's your thoughts on those new lifters that they have for the big wide toe box? Is that like that's
so our feet are supposed to be wider. Most modern shoes are pretty narrow and kind of pull your toes together. So having a wider shoe can be really helpful. A lot of people feel like they're too loose because they're used to tighter fitting shoes. So I think working towards a shoe like that can be really helpful. Not everybody likes what they look like.
Sure.
But
do you have any idea why the shoes started getting really narrow and stuff like that?
I think it's aesthetic. I mean, I have a friend that works for Nike, and I said, hey, if you ever need someone to consult with, I'll be happy to be there for you. And I said, your basketball shoes should be a little bit wider, and most people's feet are wider at this part and not this narrow. And he said, that's great, but we're worried about aesthetics and what they look like on a shelf and what your foot looks like. He's like, all the people in the NBA have custom made shoes. Like, their feet don't actually fit in these shoes that you can buy off the shelf.
Wow.
And it was just really eye-opening, because I was like, wait, I'm trying to tell you about the mechanics so people don't get hurt and they're not in pain.
And they don't care.
And they didn't care, right?
That's a bummer.
And like, one of my kiddos plays basketball and he has really wide feet and he can't wear Nikes, and he's super bummed because they're the cool shoe, but was like, you have to wear what works for your feet.
Yeah.
And so your shoe should fit your foot. So a good way to try on shoes, especially like athletic shoes, is you can pull the little liner out that comes in the shoe and stand on it.
Yeah.
Especially for kids. And so see if your foot is like bulging out over the sides of that liner. It's not going to fit in that shoe, and your foot's going to be uncomfortable.
And so that can segue into bunions. A lot of times people can fix their bunions just by, depends on where they are. I'm sure you're the doctor, so you tell me, just by doing exercises where they're straightening out their toe or stretching out their toes and then wearing a wider toe, a toe box shoe. A lot of times you can mitigate going to having surgery. Am I correct on
so
that?
you can have a bunion and never have to have surgery. But definitely being in a wider shoe, doing some exercises to keep those muscles strong can definitely be helpful. When we talk about bunion surgery is when it's hurting all the time and you've tried the wider shoes and you've tried exercises and it's just hurting because the bone itself, it's like a wider angle. It's in that position. It's hurting all the time because it's not tracking in the neutral position. And so someone like that may time to think about surgery, but just because you have a bunion, you can definitely do things to modify, make sure that your shoes don't have any kind of seam or anything over the bump, and then keeping your feet stronger definitely can keep you out of pain.
I've seen quite a few exercises out there lately that are talking about, stretching the toe out, like doing some weird, put your toe on the ground, like kind of stretching it out and stuff like that. Do you ever see that being very helpful?
So I mean, we do this exercise where you can get a big thick rubber band, like a broccoli rubber band, and put it on your big toe and hold the one side still and then working the other side to strengthen it.
Okay, I can see that.
That can definitely help for pain relief. Kind of massaging your foot in the space next to your big toe can be helpful because that gets really tight.
I bet there's a lot of
so there's spacers. There's spacers you can wear to strengthen your feet. So there's a lot you can do for pain relief. The bump will still be there, but if it doesn't hurt, then you don't have to have surgery.
That's really what it comes down to, is they can't walk on their foot because it hurts so bad, or they can't have a shoe on their foot or something like that.
Yes.
Yeah. Okay. Okay, that sucks. Hopefully that doesn't ever come to that. But you can mitigate that by not wearing super pointy toes shoes.
Right, so
and
don't
then,
wear cowboy boots and
all the time,
stilettos if you have a bunion and it's hurting.
Yeah, exactly. Cool.
But you can wear those to a wedding or something, just don't wear them every day.
Yeah. What's the role of foot mechanics in exercise, especially for like weight training?
Yeah, so what I was thinking about today is I really appreciate that you guys have small group training, because you'll watch these online group classes or big group classes and they're like, everybody needs to have their knees straight forward when they're squatting. Well, a lot of us, our mechanics don't work that way. Yep. You were talking about femur length, like if your hip angle, if you have flat feet, like all of those play into how you're going to set up for a heavy lift. Yeah. And so just being aware, and you're in a small group or you're doing one-on-one training, you can look at someone's body and see, okay, hey, if your hip is at a different angle, you're going to do better in a sumo squat or a sumo deadlift. And getting that position and being aware of someone's specific mechanics and their old injuries. Okay, your hip can't get into that position. Your knee can't get in that position. Your foot's super flat, so you're not going to do as well. Having someone to look at you and realize, okay, not all of us can be in this quote unquote perfect squat position, perfect deadlift position, because our body mechanics don't work or we're injured. Yep.
100%. That's why we take that approach, is like consultative process, figuring out who you are as a general, a big wide open net, and then we take you through some one-on-ones before we even let you go into our group classes, just because of what we do, and we're trying to elevate the industry.
Yeah, and that's when people get hurt, is because they're just, if you're trying to do online training, that's great, except that you don't have anyone there to modify and like fix what you're doing wrong.
Yeah, like in real time.
Yes.
Yeah. I mean, I have an online coach, but I also use our coaches here. Like, hey, can you watch my squat for me, or watch my bench, and like make sure I'm not doing it wrong right now, because I can't watch myself. I can feel where I'm at, but if you don't have exquisite spatial awareness and body awareness, it's really easy to be like, oh, your shoulder was a little bit tucked in, that's why it hurts on that last rep, or maybe your knee was out and one was in, so your body, now your hip hurts or something.
Well, and there's a difference between online training where someone's you're sending them videos for evaluation and critiquing, versus just like, I'm going to take an online Peloton weightlifting class and then, gosh, my back's hurting, what happened? And it's like, probably it's a technique thing or a weakness thing. Yeah.
And that's what I do. I'm videoing my lifts from different angles, sending it to the coach. They evaluate, and it's great. It's just not as good as like real time. Like, hey, I squatted. Cool. Correct that. Now it's like, I squatted. I send them the videos. They give me feedback. Next week, I get to implement those if I remember them. And my coaches are great. Don't get me wrong. I wouldn't have been coaching there for 5 years if I didn't think it was good stuff. But there's just a different level of like right now type of
Well,
things.
And it depends on your goal. So if you're competing, you're going to have a different kind of training goal than someone just working out for exercise.
Yeah. How can somebody improve their foot mechanics to enhance their performance and prevent injuries?
Well, I think definitely getting your feet looked at, and I have patients that come in just kind of for a tune-up. So like, hey, this part is bugging me when I'm doing this. Okay, do we need to add an arch support? Do we need to change your shoes? Do we need to send you to physical therapy to work on your mechanics, or get some manual therapy done? So I think just being aware of like how you're wearing your shoes out, what's these kind of nagging injuries that you get? Are you getting some arch pain? Are you getting some tendonitis? Do you always stand with kind of on the outside of your feet and loading that part? So that's getting tired. So kind of looking at that for an evaluation, where you see a podiatrist or you see a physical therapist, just kind of being aware of that is going to help for injury prevention to keep you doing what you want to be doing.
That's awesome. Have you ever heard of like force plates?
Yes.
For like squats. Have you ever used anything
I haven't
like that?
used that.
They're pretty cool. There's a gym in Redmond. It's actually a physical therapy spot that has them. It's pretty awesome to see kind of where you're putting more force, because everybody has like we're all asymmetrical, right? And so you have different. Mine's my left. I'm always constantly doing that. But if you know that, you can start to, when you're squatting or deadlifting or whatever, shift more over to that other side. So it just is, more awareness, I think, is great.
Well, and I just think also when you're looking at shoes, like if someone is looking for a pair of running shoes, it's super helpful to go down to FootZone and they have you walk across the scanner that show where your force is and like what the kind of shoes that might work for you. You know, that's really helpful. You know, do some people need to be in orthotics or arch supports? That's also helpful to know. You know, some people need it short term for, like, you would need an ankle brace after you sprain your ankle to get back to what they were at. And then some people have long-term issues or an old fracture or something like that, and they need to be in orthotic long-term.
You know, it's interesting to me when I had my foot broke, I went to the urgent care just down the road, and they x-rayed my foot, and they said, well, it doesn't show a fracture now, but it's broken. And they said it can take up to 6 months for a fracture to show up. That completely blows my mind. Like, what's up with that? Like, how do you understand?
Well, so if you have like a bone contusion, which is like a bruise to your bone, that doesn't show up on an x-ray, but it could show up like on an MRI.
Gotcha.
But if your foot's like swollen, bruised, you can't put weight on it, you know, we kind of know from exam that you probably, or 90% sure you broke it.
Yeah.
So we're going to recommend, you know, crutches and a boot or something like that. But even like with a stress fracture, it won't show up sometimes for a couple weeks. So it's like we can put a mark on an x-ray where we're watching, and then as someone's healing and we took an x-ray a month later, oh yeah, now it shows up. But if we'd waited a month to treat it, then you're going to be a month behind in your rehab.
For sure. I guess the idea of like, it's like,
why does
physically broken, how come I can't see it? Like, that just blows my mind.
Yeah.
It just doesn't make any sense.
Well, and I tell people, like, when they're healing from a fracture or surgery, you know, your bone is laying down these new cells, and it's, you know, healing, but it doesn't always show up. So we can't, like, see a physical... I mean, if we looked at the bone under a microscope, we could see it healing. But as it's healing, especially for surgery, so we created a cut in a bone, which is like a fracture. If we took an x-ray week 1, it's not going to show a difference yet, but it'll show progressively. So I tell people, like, it's like if you were building a house and your foundation and your walls are in, but you haven't put the insulation, you haven't put up your drywall, you haven't painted, you're not ready to move in. So like as it's healing, it's like you're building that house. So the structure's there, like it's pretty safe and steady to be walking on in a boot, but it's not ready for you to run on it yet, be in a regular shoe. So it's like the x-ray does lag and like showing the improvement.
Maybe if it's just like the technology of x-rays is not good enough to see without it being like under a microscope.
Yeah, so if you were playing in the NFL or the NBA and we had all these awesome scanners and we could get an MRI and we could show exactly what's going on, you know, there is physical ways to prove what's going on in the bone, but for the average person, like you or I break our foot, we're going to be like, okay, the x-ray is pretty clear that you broke your foot, but we can't quite see it on x-ray. Yes, we can order an MRI or a CAT scan, but it's, you know, we would put you in a boot and on crutches anyways.
Yeah, and it's just...
it's cost prohibitive.
Exactly. And MRIs are not cheap at all. And not cheap at all. Awesome. All right, so like recovery and rehab. So when I broke my foot, and I don't know what your stance is on this, but they basically told me crutch in a boot, 8 weeks, no nothing. And I was like, man, that doesn't seem good for me because I know that like nowadays movement and blood flow is key, and if I let my foot atrophy because I'm not doing anything with it. So I went and saw my other physical therapist friend, I will not name his name, but he's a very good friend of mine, he's super smart. He's like, ditch that. He's like, wear the boot and the crutches when you're on your foot for a long time. He's like, but other than that, take the boot off. I want you to do toe moves, foot moves, and then slowly start implementing a little bit of pressure on it each day, and a little bit more, because it's going to allow you to keep muscle without it atrophying. And then, because he also knew I was like halfway in my training to go to Worlds. And he's like, you still plan on going to Worlds? And I'm like, yeah, as soon as his foot heals, back on the platform. He's like, so we need to heal as fast as possible. What's your thoughts on recovery and stuff like that? Is that like a good recommendation?
Well, so I think it depends, A, on the person, B, on the injury, you know, right? But in general, if someone's pretty healthy and they have good bone density in general and they're training for something, we don't want you to just sit and do nothing for 8 weeks. So especially that first week or two, you can do upper body, you can do abs, you can work your other leg, still keeping the weight off of that. But yeah, you should take your boot off and do some ankle circles, get your toes moving, get the blood flow. putting a little pressure on it is often okay. It depends on if it's like an unstable fracture, but
yeah, totally. He was like, I saw the X-ray.
Yeah.
Like, it's not like busted off. It's just a little fracture. He's like, obviously, pain. Like, if it hurts too much, don't do it.
Right.
But just put a little bit up there.
Pain's your body's way of saying, hey, we're not ready for that yet. Right.
Yeah.
But yeah, in that case, I would say if you're training for something, like keep doing your other lifts that you can.
Yeah, that's what I did.
And get a little bit going, but often it might be okay to ride a stationary bike. It might be okay to swim. Like, might be okay to just do some putting your pressure on your foot. Yeah. So we don't want you to completely do nothing and have this license to be like, oh, I broke something, I had surgery, I'm not going to do anything for 8 weeks. Yeah. It's going to put you so far behind when you are ready to do that thing. So we want you to keep, even people that are like laid up and don't necessarily have access to a gym, I'm like, grab some jugs and water and do bicep curls. You can do things at home.
Your body's very good at recovery, and if you continuously move it, it's sending out more blood blood and all that type of stuff for blood flow, and it's going to help you heal.
Yes,
it's going to help you heal.
For sure.
Movement is
you're meant to move.
Yes, you are meant to move. Nice. All right. Are there any particular signs that an athlete should watch for, other than like the shoe thing, for like some more serious foot problems?
I think we all get these little naggy aches and pains, and so you don't have to run in the second that something hurts. But, okay, did it hurt today and then it's gone tomorrow? Then that's probably just a little, like, you tweak something, probably not going to be a long-term thing. But if it's hurting every time you walk, every time you're exercising, and then it's progressively each week getting a little bit worse, that's a sign that you probably need to get it checked. A sign of a stress fracture would be kind of this naggy, achy pain every time you're doing something like that's high impact, like running, and it just always hurts in the same place. That can be a sign of a stress fracture. You definitely would want to get that checked. And again, something that's, I know it's annoying, but in healthcare, we're like, okay, what does it hurt on a scale of 1 to 10? And it's super annoying, but we want you to qualify what it feels like to you in your experience. So say you've had surgery and that was a 10 out of 10. And then the pain you're having now is like a 1 or a 2. Well, it's probably okay to push through that and keep going.
Sure.
But if that 1 or 2 now is like a 6 or 7 most days, then we want you to get it checked. Go in, whether massage is your thing, you have a chiropractor, you have a podiatrist, you have a doctor that you want to see, but getting it checked just to see, we just don't want you to like leave these nagging injuries because they will often turn into something else.
Yeah, 100%. That's awesome. Okay, can you speak to like progressive overloading with barbell training and how that can strengthen your foot, or, because I know you do a lot of that, same thing. Is there anything that like particularly like that you would recommend or just speak to overloading with weights and barbells and strength training?
Yeah, I mean, you need to overload and just work your way up with more lifts and more weight to build that muscle. And so I definitely agree that that's how we need to weight train. If you don't have an increased volume, you're not going to put that increased demand on your muscles, and you're not going to increase your strength. So
your body adapts to whatever you put at it.
Right.
And so if you're only doing body weight, your body only adapts, and your muscle mass and your bone mass and your tendon strength only matches what you're going to tell it to do.
Right. Or if every single time you do bench press, you're putting the exact amount of weight on there, you're never going to get any gains. Yeah. So
your body adapts to what you give it.
You're strong enough to do that, but you have to challenge yourself.
Yeah. I hear it all the time, like, I don't want to get too bulky. Like, okay, you're not going to. And if you do, I'd love to track your journey, because I could bottle that up probably and sell it and be a millionaire.
Right. If you look at the amount of women in weightlifting that are really bulky, it's a very, very small percentage.
Yeah.
Most women do need to lift heavier, and they need to add more weight, and they're not going to bulk up.
Especially for bone mass. I mean, because osteoporosis is a huge thing. And we're even starting to see it more in men these days because of all estrogens and stuff like that, and people not weight training and stuff like that. And I look at it, and I've said this so many times on the podcast, exercising and weight training and getting muscle mass and bone mass and tendon strength is like investing. If you do it for your whole life, you're going to have a bunch of the goodness when you're older, right? if you wait till you're 50 to start doing it, you're going to have much less of bone mass, muscle mass, tendon strength when you get into your elderly years.
Yeah, and for sure, it's particularly women, we need to strength train.
Yeah.
We have to stay strong, and so that when you're doing something funky, you don't get hurt. So, I mean, if we lift weights now, then when you're gardening and you have to throw some heavy bags, you're not going to hurt your back, or you have to pick up a kid, you're not going to tweak something.
I was just going to say that for sure. In our babies and barbell class, that's one of the things that ladies are like, I can pick up my car seat, the kid's car seat with the kid in it, and like I'm not all funky. I'm like, just pick it up and walk.
Yeah, you don't like throw your back out.
Yeah, you don't throw your back out or like hurt your core or something like that. There's just so many benefits to it, and we've just been shouting it from the hilltop for
sure. And I look back, like right now I'm not competing in powerlifting, but I competed for like 5 or 6 years, and I was lifting a ton and way more often than I am now, and I by no means looked bulky, and none of the women I was competing with looked what we in our mind think of bulky. We're all just super strong, and you're in really good shape when you do that, and
just have fun.
Yeah, and I'm like, I'd love to get back to competing, but my kids are in sports right now, and I run a small business, and all these things are getting in the way. Yeah. But just because you're lifting does not mean you're going to look like what a woman is thinking of somebody
like a bodybuilder
competing in bodybuilding Miss Universe. To get to that point, you have to do so much time in the gym and so much work on your diet, and they're also cutting, and so they are restricting water and restricting food to look like that. You have to work so hard and so many hours to do that. The average person lifting 3 to 5 days a week is not going to look like
they're not going to reach that level. The same thing as like the CrossFit Games, like the athletes that are in the CrossFit Games, those people put in so many hours to get to where they are, and the average person will never ever get there, and that's because they don't put in the hours.
Well, and a lot of like that body type is very genetic, to bulk up and like get that really bulked up look. I mean, you have to have some genetics going for you to get there.
Genetics or a lot of performance-enhancing drugs, which there's some of that as well.
Well, and steroids, yes. Steroids are helpful.
Yeah, steroids will definitely help you get there if you want to get there, but I don't recommend them at all. All right, Amanda, it was great to have you on the podcast. Do you have anything else that you would like to chat about today or put out there for the people and foot health?
I guess the main thing is, like, don't be scared to go see a podiatrist. Okay. Just because you come in does not mean that we're going to recommend you have to be in these super heavy-duty orthotics that you think of, that you're going to have surgery. I mean, a lot of people I see are, like, people that have these kind of naggy foot problems but are trying to hike, powerlift, go play pickleball. And so I want to keep you active in doing those things. So it's like, okay, what shoes can we get you in? What exercises can you do? What can we do to modify that to keep you doing the things that you love? Instead of, okay, you have a bunion, you need surgery. I think that's kind of an old mentality. And it's like, just don't be scared to go and see someone that's going to help you to reach your goals. And if you're like the kind of person that's never going to wear a pair of orthotics, we're not going to put you in them. Yeah. I mean, that's kind of counterproductive.
You guys are only here to help.
Right.
And, you're definitely, I see this a lot. I think a lot of healthcare has been changing. It used to be, I think the mentality was, cut them open first. Yeah. And now I think that's the very last thing. When I went to go have my last knee injury looked at, they said, yeah, you have a torn meniscus. Like, let's just see what happens in 6 months. I was like, oh, I thought you guys were going to tell me you're going to cut me open tomorrow. Like, they're like, nope, that's the last thing we want to do.
Well, and it just depends on how you're functioning, right?
Totally.
Like, so if you can lift, if you can squat pretty heavy and your knee doesn't bug you, let's not cut it open, because that's going to cause scar tissue and you could have other problems. But if that's the only thing holding you back, and you've tried all these other things, then maybe it's the point to think about it. Maybe it's the time
to do it, yeah. So it's all about timing and, of course, seeing the right doctor.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah. How long have you had your practice now?
Let's see. So I have been in my own practice. It's been about 8 years.
Awesome.
And then I just recently merged with another group in this year. So now I'm with Northwest Foot Care. Cool. And it's been great. All those guys have been in practice for many years, and I like how they run it. My old partner moved our business to Redmond, so it's been a good change, and it allows me to be able to still see my family and do other fun things. When you own your own
small practice and business, It's tough, especially when you are the primary giver and you do the thing you're doing. So congrats to you.
Yeah, so it's been a good change to share the wealth of employees and all the fun small business things with a bigger group.
Yeah, for sure. With just taking a little bit of that burden and putting it on their shoulders as well.
Yes.
And just having people that you can talk to about the things that, you can't talk to regular people that don't own businesses.
Well, and it's great also to be able to consult with other people that do the same thing that you do, that like treat runners and lifters. So you're like, hey, I have this person that has this kind of weird thing. Like, what do you think?
Yeah.
That's really helpful too.
Yeah, I mean, you can't always know everything. So if you have a group of people that collectively know more than you, that's an awesome thing to have. It only elevates your value to the community.
Yeah, and I think the great thing about being in Central Oregon is that because it is a smaller town, we have such great resources. So it's like, I can send people to you guys that need strength training. Yeah. I know a great couple physical therapists. Mm-hmm. If you need PRP in your knee, I can tell you who to go to.
Yeah.
Which is great because we can refer back and forth, and you've really met the people, and you're like, oh, I know what you're all about. And
it's such a active community that if you are not a good provider, you won't make it here.
Yeah,
you're going to be out. You're going to be out because the good people are here, and the people who are here know who the good people are.
Yeah,
I guarantee that. Yeah, it's just like food in New York. You can't get bad food in New York because the competition is so fierce that you're gonna go out of business because you're not
true. It's true.
Nice. All right. Well, hey, thanks a lot for coming on the podcast again, and thanks a lot, guys, for joining us today. I'm going to leave you like I leave you every single time, and that is: success is not final, failure is not fatal. It is the courage to continue that counts, and everything you want in this life is on the other side of your fears. So go ahead, get out there, and take some action. Thanks for joining us on the Go Heavy or Go Home podcast today. We hope you got a lot of value and had a ton of fun. If you guys want to learn a little bit more about what we do, or just have a ton of resources at your fingertips, head over to benstrengthwarehouse.com and hit the Start My Journey button. All right, guys, until next time, go heavy or go home.